First experience was with the VFX one, that old one that brought me. I used to play MechWarrior 2 online. It was amazing. I have all the gear in that, but as David said, although the response time was pretty good on that one, the screen was not immersive at all. It was very small. It's like I was looking at a TV screen in front of me. And I knew it was very niche.
In the 1990s, with something called virtuality, which had two very blurry lenses from cameras that were around your ears and then went through mirrors. And it was an experience that suggested it wasn't ready yet. It was very interesting, but it was blurry, it made your eyes hurt, and when you move your head, the update was so slow, it only eventually caught up. And so it's astonishing how far we've come now.
You forgot that you were wearing this headset and you were just looking at this world that happened to be made up of polygons. And I think that was the first time for me that I realised that when the tech can go away and you just don't realise you're wearing this thing in your head, then that's a transformative moment for me.
There's a lot of difficulty in manoeuvring players around. So I could immediately see that there's going to be many games where the enjoyment comes from the journey might not necessarily work. So driving games maybe, like cockpit games, work quite well, but like when you're like having to physically fly around like a bird, it's like, oh, this could work, this could be quite cool, until you actually get in there and you go, whoa, that's not a very nice experience. But then I went, like the physicality, and I really wanted to make VR feel real. So in our game it was like smashing objects and like really physicsy based things. And then from that, we started working on another game called Unseen Diplomacy, where it was actually like this physical assault course. And that's like the first time any like game where I've got to go, like, this is a physical thing you're doing. You're physically rolling underneath lasers and crawling on the floor, and that's just because of the Vive and your ability to like room scale VR to track around the space.
What killed VR the first time around is the nausea factor and the problem with people getting to grips with it, which I think we have to. I mean, I'm lucky because I've got quite an iron stomach and don't suffer from some of the issues. But it's something we found, with increased frame rate, decreased latency, you get a much better feel. Your body position matches the body position that you have in your imagined character.
That's right.
Particularly the movement. A game like Elite Dangerous is frankly virtually perfect because even your hand positions match, and you can see your hands in the game. And similarly, racing car games, I think, going to work very well. The challenge becomes when you start getting up and walking around.
When you have a limited amount of space that you can move in, as long as there's a direct connection between what the Rift or your device is telling you and what you're seeing, then it works. But the moment you try to move to beyond the space that you can actually physically move within while you're playing, that's the problem. So we've been experimenting with some of these ideas of how to translate, where you can mark a position and then do a quick transition. The whole idea of being able to see your hands in your field of view gives you a sense of a frame of reference. But I think the jury is still out in terms of how to allow arbitrary movement.
What we found with Land's End is that we move people around the world in Land's End, and we're very gentle with it. Mm-hmm. But we find that roughly 80% of people can handle it fine and will be in there for hours. Mm-hmm. And it might come out, like the more motion sensitive will come out feeling maybe a little bit lightheaded. It's not a rip it off moment. And I think a large part of that is kind of down to two things. One is not fully free-form movement, but constraining it in ways which are more comfortable for people.
Right.
But also the content. And because Land's End is for Gear VR, it's not fully like incredibly high frequency detail around the place. And that lack of detail somehow lets your brain kind of not worry about it too much.
If we shift from walking around big levels and we shift towards interaction on a small portion of a level, what detail is now spread into drawers or behind a picture, that kind of stuff, it works very well. We never did that before because that's not very conducive to mouse and keyboard or gamepads, but now
you can reach in and grab things.
Exactly.
For VR experiences to be worth putting this headset on, it's got to be something that makes the most of you being somewhere.
The most powerful experience I had in VR, which has to do with frame of reference, was multiplayer. Seeing someone else in VR with their hands interacting with something, that is not just an anchor, it's a whole new way of interacting with the game. That is for me the most powerful experience, because it's in between first person and third person, because I am first person, but I've seen someone else in third person, and that is so powerful.
How much? Because I think that's a kind of highlights the uncanny valley kind of amplification that VR does. VR makes everything that you look at uncanny valley, and seeing another real person with real live reactive track things it throws everything else into, makes it look all fake, and seeing that reality is suddenly so much more powerful than all of the fake stuff around you.
And in diplomacy, you get on the floor and you have to use the Vive controllers and do a screwdriver. And gamers, we found, like people who obviously were gamers that were playing it, they really struggled with trying to undo the screwdriver. They were like trying to press the buttons or something or wiggle it. But like the non-gamers, like knew instantly how to use a screwdriver. They'd pick it up and they'd twist it around like this. And like they just immediately got it.
It's almost like the inverse problem, that it's not teaching players that needs to happen. It's that we need to teach game developers not to try and teach players, but to actually just do things that people do naturally.
Well, the parallels, when the controller first came out for consoles, there was a lot of resistance from it, particularly from people
Felt
who used
unnatural.
to mouse and keyboard and say, how on earth are we going to do this? And you get a lot of people who are looking at their feet in game as they walk around. And I think the problem is now people completely expect to experience game how to use a controller, such that the game doesn't even bother with a tutorial for it. You know, we know what the buttons are likely to do, and all of that side of it. And it's that stage we're at. You know, we've had it with other sort of experimental technologies like Kinect that we've gone through, and work out what works well or what the problems are. I mean, the whole issue, which seems to be not being discussed with VR at the moment, is with the sort of ballooning of the play space. The fact that you can now that highlights a real problem. Is how many people are going to be able to have a 15-foot square completely clear of furniture.
With no pets and kids.
That's right. And then I think, we don't need to move the coffee table, and within 5 minutes you'd have fallen over it.
I think that's the equivalent of 3D. That's the 3D TV equivalent of VR. Nobody's going to do that. That's not going to happen. I think VR is going to become quite a static experience.
The crazy thing was, when we first started playing the DK2 or DK1, people didn't know they could turn their heads. Like,
they sit there looking
like this.
You can turn your head, you know.
So like we had to design our level so there's text going across, so they would read the text, and then when they move their head, like, oh yeah, I can move my head, and then force them to turn around. We had to make the level a big U-turn, so they'd force around all the way around so they can actually figure out.
At the beginning of Land's End, the first thing it says is, "Please turn around."
Please turn around. Another interesting thing that's kind of as an engine maker, what we're trying to do is support multiple devices, and so there's the touch controllers and the move controllers and the Vive controllers and the standard controllers. So we're producing a game where we need to try to support people's ability to play the game with all those devices. And so, okay, my thumbs are my hands. No, my hands can move. No, I can only move my hands, but I can't rotate them. What are the ways that we can standardize that so people can enjoy the game through a variety of different devices?
Currently, we're almost entirely regarding the headsets as output devices where the computation is being done elsewhere. The Gear VR is unusual because it's actually being done in the device, hence the lack of need for cables. And you mentioned, that games like Elite couldn't be done on Gear VR. That doesn't necessarily the case because it could stream to it from another device. And much as things like the IMAX content could be streamed to a device in the same way. So I think it's not. We're at the very, very early days, and it's got to mature yet. And I think the danger is actually if too many people adopt it too quickly, they will join during what we should all recognise will be a learning period.
There are already big games out there. They should not be played. Really, they should not be tried by anyone. If someone tries that, that's their end of their VR experience forever. You have to convince that person to do it all over again, forget those bad experiences and do it again.
I think it might end up something like karaoke, where you go somewhere specifically with a group of friends to go through this half-hour experience. I think the big problem is going to be them having enough cash to make these experiences
That's right.
good enough
Yeah.
with the limited throughput of people that you have with a physical space.
This
But that's going to be the best
the
experience,
business model
best
is
VR experience.
Theme parks are still the place to explore those kinds of,
Disney's been
advanced.
doing it for years.
Yeah.
Parental problem already is kids are seen completely disengaged on their Xboxes or PlayStations or whatever. When you've got headphones and a great lump on the front of your face, that's from a parent's point of view. You have no idea what they're watching. You you have no idea what they're seeing, who they're talking to. They're doing weird movements, so something going on. You go, what's happening? I think that is a problem. That for it to go mass market, we have to seriously think about that. I think Sony have, in that Morpheus you can also see on the screen.
I mean, you look at the US where the New York Times just sent out, 2 million cardboards to their readers.
Yeah.
Like, it's getting to the point where access to mobile VR will be mass market. And I
year
feel
or
like
two, maybe.
there's
Yeah.
kind of quite a lot of, I think people talk about how trust and things for VR, and I think there's not enough focus on how that's actually going to happen, which is with mobile VR, not with desktop VR, live VR. Empathy of really seeing somebody else's world, I think, could be quite powerful and good force for the future and for international relations and all of that.
Game AI has been going in a path which is very different from general use VR AI for quite some time. They will have to go back to the point of making AI more narrative driven.
If I look at a character and they know I'm looking at them, then the AI has a chance to notice, and you suddenly feel like there is a connection.
Eye contact is
Interactivity
so
in that
important
world.
in human
Yeah.
interaction,
Yeah.
and VR and AR, that actually allows us to do that sort of thing in a much more powerful way.
Basically, I'm really looking forward to the physicality. Like, this is part of the reason why I wanted a virtual physical assault course where you're literally rolling around and crawling around and things, because that's the first time in any game where I've been able to feel like I'm physically interacting.
Thank you for such a fascinating discussion and let us experience your various different titles, and we look forward to the future of what you